How's it going, everybody? If you're watching, I promise this video is going to blow your ever-living mind. We're going to watch a few videos, and then I'm going to bring us to the end game really quick, because the end game was nothing like I thought it was, and all of a sudden I get to talking and my damn stand is just creeping up and acting up like I can't get it set. So I think that'll do, hopefully. Alright, not sure where or how I want to start this video, but I'm just going to go ahead and talk to you guys like this and then move it around. So, I've done so much research, my brain is spun, and I don't know if you guys have ever done so much research on a subject that you just could not get anything done, but I am literally right at that point. You know, I'm kind of just, hold on a second, sorry about that, not sure how that fell. Rotate my phone, okay, here we go, let's see if that'll work. Oh, I see what I was doing, I was going this way. Thanks for holding on, everybody. All of a sudden that thing just wanted to take a dive on me. We come over here and see if this is on, because I'm going to work between multiple computers to go through this. So, if you have any questions, post them along the way, and then we'll get to the end. So, I've been a long-time activist. I'm now 45 years old. I've been an activist, you know, deep into my teenage years, from being one of the first people in my city to sit outside of a science class on evolution and think that I was really smart about it, and maybe I was, who knows, to being the first person in my entire city to sue a daycare, and that's in Austin, Texas, and I sued the Bluebonnet Daycare for ostracizing my child, not letting my child into the daycare because he had not yet been vaccinated, which I've been a strong person against vaccinations ever since, you know, I can remember back to being a young kid, a young child. Well, there are times when a vaccination is needed. There are times when there's an outbreak of some type of virus and a vaccine is needed to you know, reduce the effects of people getting infected. We recognize that. Whether it's to the level that our Supreme Courts have ruled, I don't think so. I'm going to tell you much of what everybody else will not. Many of the so-called truthers on YouTube or Facebook or any of these people have no merit to what they've done. They maybe joined a protest and, you know, that's it. And, you know, they act like they're know-it-alls or, you know, smarter than everybody else. Well, you know, we're going to challenge that here in just a moment. So what I've learned is this: Denmark has just rushed as fast as can be, and Denmark passed a law that forced a mandatory vaccine for all of its citizens for coronavirus, and we're going to look at this.
For coronavirus, this might be it. In Seattle, US researchers have given the first shot of an experimental vaccine developed in record time.
Everybody's feeling so helpless right now, and I realized that there was something that I could do to help, and I'm excited to be here.
But it could still take a year to have something for universal use. Back in Washington, the president announced dramatic new steps to reduce the chance of spreading the disease.
My administration is recommending that all Americans, including the young and healthy, work to engage in schooling from home when possible, avoid gathering in groups of more than 10 people, avoid discretionary travel, and avoid eating and drinking at bars, restaurants, and public food courts.
The president gave himself 10 out of 10 for his handling of the crisis.
All right, so they're working on a virus, right? What I want to go to over here really quick is to bring up a screen that I was just looking at, maybe here, where Denmark has forced Man, what the hell did I do with it? But there it goes. Denmark passes a law right here. This will blow you the hell away. God, dude, this blew me the frick away when I saw this, because what I'm going to tell you is this is the proof of the whole video right here. And give me just a minute. Hold on, my son, let me see if I can't just play this video for us again, and hopefully, let's see. I've got a lot of stuff on here, and I'm going to get to it, but hold on a second. Hey man, I love you. I cannot tell you how rude that was to go take a big old leak while I'm making a video like this. Thank you. It's so loud. Anyways, so Denmark passes a law enabling forced corona vaccinations on adults and children. Denmark has passed an emergency law that allows the government to force people to take a vaccine for coronavirus. The emergency law gives authorities sweeping powers to tackle the COVID-19 pandemic and will remain in force until March of 2021. Citizens who refuse to be tested will face fines and potential prison time and will be prevented from entering shops, grocery stores, public institutions, hospitals, as long as being restricted from using public transport. As well as enforcing the quarantine measures, the law will also allow the authorities to force people to be vaccinated, even though there's currently no vaccination for the virus. So, let's get into this. Of course I'm an anti-vaxxer. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm an I am against, I believe that my body belongs to me. I believe that I should have the final say in who vaccinates my body, what touches my body. That's, that in essence is my body. So thus, I think that my body means that I'm against anything going into my body. Also, I am a vegan, and I don't want any animal byproducts going into my body. And that first and foremost is my primary concern, and I'm against anything that can be damaging to my body, be it vaccines, be it foods, be it attitudes, influences, but absolutely I've been against vaccines my whole life. Now,
can I say a fun fact?
I say that I don't know. I don't know if I want you to throw in humor right now or anything like that. So. I think that, for the reason that there are, and I said this earlier, that there are diseases, that there are outbreaks that we have the heal to, we have a vaccine to, has proven that things have worked. I'm not saying that that's the case, like polio, smallpox, and these things were also eradicated by healthy water, hygiene, and taking care of our body to not infect other people. So, with that being said, we're going to watch a video here. Denmark has forced vaccination on its citizens. Am I saying that Donald Trump or the Center for, who's above Donald Trump in this matter would blow your mind? The president has very little say in what the Centers for Disease and Control do. Because the way that the Constitution and the way that the laws are written, in this case, the Center for Disease and Control would have the leading authority on whether or not we're all vaccinated. I'm not saying at this point that the United States government is going to come in with a vaccination and vaccinate us all. What I am saying is that they could at any given moment, according to the law and according to the Supreme Court. Yeah, Jessica, I can absolutely make NASA Live's face mask. That would be hilarious. I have some.
Oh, is that Jessica?
No, that's a different Jessica. we're going to watch a video, and my whole life I thought that vaccines were not enforceable by your local police or military, because I had, like I said, I sued in the state of Texas to get my child accepted into a school without vaccinations, and we won. We won our case. I mean, it's a very, very good ruling. Fines came down on this daycare. I mentioned the daycare earlier, and then after they were hit with fines by the Texas Department of Health, we brought our child back, and then they kept my child in his own room. Like, they were really afraid that my child not being vaccinated, Apple, turn that down or off, that my child not being vaccinated was going to infect the whole school, in which, if an outbreak occurred or something, like, who knows, maybe it could, maybe it would. What I am going to show you is a misconception that people have. People think that they can tell the government, no, you can't vaccinate me because the 14th Amendment shows that I have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and I have the right to say no, that my body belongs to me. And I'm going to tell you that is the most faulty position you can have, because this will blow your mind. I'm going to clean my phone off as well. It needs to be clean right here. Because no matter how you look at it, under mandatory vaccines, we are all slaves. Whether you like it or not, you are a slave. The government owns your body, lock, stock, and barrel. Okay? In an outbreak or in an emergency outbreak, or any time that the Center for Disease and Control or the federal government says that you have to be inoculated, that you have to be vaccinated, you're going to get vaccinated. It's been the ruling. The most powerful people in the country, in my opinion, who have more power than the president, are your Supreme Court judges. Although they cannot act outside of their judicial branch, they can make rulings on cases that have hundreds of years of consequences. And this is a case that is probably, out of all the truthing you've ever done, right, be it the shape of the earth, veganism, the ending of abortion, all the cases of the earth do not measure the weight and the validity of what this case that I'm going to show you. Prior to watching this case, though, we're going to watch a video that everybody's seen, and we're going to see a man who checked himself into a hospital. When he checked himself into the hospital, he appeared sick, even though he may not have been totally sick with the coronavirus. It seems to me that this guy was a doctor anyways. If you come in for treatment, a doctor has the authority to literally either vaccinate you, treat you, or release you. And in this case, during a national outbreak, this person was vaccinated against his will, and he was citing 14th Amendment. I have the right to life, liberty, and happiness. This is my body. This is my property. And the courts have ruled since 1905 in the Jacobson versus the state of Massachusetts that the police, the local police, can vaccinate your body against your will, and there will be no compensation paid to you, and also that the virus in itself may not be a virus that kills you. Apple, whatever you're doing back there, please stop, buddy. Don't throw stuff around back there.
I'm trying to put this.
Okay, how about you do it in another room, son? It's just real loud right behind the camera. The government can vaccinate you against your will, and there is nothing you can do about it. All the screaming, all the protesting and everything that's been done, you lose. you're a slave. I'm going to let you watch a video, and then we're going to go back onto what federal cases, what cases have been cited in both federal and state courts that give the authority of the government, the local police force, the National Guard, state police, to vaccinate you against your own will. So let's take a look at this case right here, and then we'll talk about why it's so nothing's going to change this law unless your representatives, your legislation of your state gives you the right to have an exemption, through a religious exemption, through a conscientious exemption, or a medical exemption, meaning I've got reasons why if I were to get this vaccine, more damage could be done to me. The court doesn't care. All right, so let's get a look in this, and I'll fast forward this video through and through.
I can't do that. If y'all gonna try to quarantine me or whatever, you can't force me to put anything in my arm. You cannot do that. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that.
It does work like that because you're a slave.
How do you know I'm sick? You haven't even done a test on me. How do you know I'm sick? You haven't even done a test on me. They tried to do a test on you. Work like that. It doesn't work like that. It does not work like that. It doesn't work like that.
It does work like that.
You can't. I'm in the same hood, same nigga.
So this guy's getting really upset that he checks himself into the hospital. Mistake number one. If you check yourself into a hospital during a national outbreak of a virus that has similarities of coughing, runny nose, a fever, you are an official dumbass unless you are at the point that you cannot walk, that you cannot argue, that you cannot talk. And my wife is going to come stand behind me for just a minute. Come over here, Heather. And we're going to play this. I want to tell you what happened to me and my wife. She's right over here. See if you guys can see us there. Grab a chair, babe.
There's a chair behind you.
So her father was in the hospital in January and February. And in February, we went into the hospital to visit her father. And I think that I possibly got the coronavirus while I was in the hospital. He had the flu. He was just not doing very good at all in the hospital. He actually died February 20th of this year. Well, the last day we were there in the hospital, I had literally told her, Heather, I have to get to the hospital immediately because day one in the hospital, now the first outbreak of the coronavirus happened, in January?
I think it was the 21st, yeah.
The 21st of January. So I ended up getting sick in February. Day number one that I visited her father, I just noticed, gosh, man, I can't breathe. Like I thought I was having a bad allergy attack. Day number two, I was at the position that I was really starting to feel sick. Day number three, I was literally inoperable. Day number four, because we were there 4 days, yeah? Yeah, we were there. Day number 4, 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm in the hospital with her dad. We spent the night there, several nights. And day number 4, there's a virus in my body kicking my butt so bad that I could not even walk from the hospital room to the car. That was the longest walk I'd ever taken in my life. Her dad, the specialist, came in and said, we're going to keep him. He's got pneumonia. We were like, wow, man, we didn't even realize he had pneumonia, just that he was kind of a little sick. Well, they had no coronavirus tests at that time, and Pennsylvania's been an outbreak state for, one of the first outbreak states. So we drove straight from Pennsylvania all the way to Boston, and I went and checked myself. The first thing that I did is I checked myself into the hospital. I didn't even come and see my other wife. I didn't stop and see the children. I was so bad she had to walk me out of the bathroom of a gas station, you know, because I needed to pee, and then she had to walk me back to the car. And in any other case, I would have called the ambulance on myself. I was that bad. So, needless to say, I get into the hospital. They do all the tests. They give me a Z-Pack. I was sick. I was bad off. I got my Z-Pack. I got out of there. It took several days for me to recover. I've had pneumonia before. So I've had pneumonia twice. I met her when I had pneumonia. She served me. She was not a nurse then. She served me food. And I met her the first time I ever met her in the hospital laying down. I had just woken up and she was bringing in lunch. And for me, I fell in love immediately. I've had pneumonia before. Nothing in my life has ever hit me so crippling like the virus that I had. Now, they couldn't diagnose me as corona because it was still too early yet. There was no test. There was no way. So whether I had it or a severe strain of the flu or something that I got into the hospital, right, I can understand the sentiment. Man, you think you're going to die. And then days later, you ended up getting sick. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so she ended up having to go to the hospital. And so this was, you know, we're in the month of February. And, you know, she had to go into the hospital, get a Z-Pack. And, you know, it's later in this video, I'm going to show you what cures coronavirus according to Harvard Medical University. Let's keep watching this video to tell you this, that had there been an outbreak of a virus like corona, or we were in lockdown like we are, I would have checked myself in because I just thought I was going to die. But I wouldn't go in if I still had the energy to fight like this guy. This guy's not sick to the point that he needs to be in the hospital during a national quarantine.
That is not going to work, bro. I got the juice, bro. I know what's going on. Shit need to change. Healthcare, criminal justice reform, all that need to change. I'm very well educated.
Hey, James?
No. I don't want to talk, bro.
Okay.
Give me a lawyer. I want a lawyer before y'all touch me.
Okay.
It doesn't work like that, bro. You can't. No.
It does work like that.
No.
I'm giving it to you cold, man, all right?
It doesn't work like that, bro. I'm not trying to hurt you.
I'm not trying to hurt you.
I'm not upset. My hands are on my look.
I know. But
my hands are just like this. Y'all see my hands?
James, I'm trying to...
My hand, I'm not tripping. I'm not tripping, bro.
James.
Y'all tripping. Y'all out here tripping. Y'all lost, bro. Y'all need to wake. Everybody's talking about they woke.
We're just going to go a little further. He's arguing his constitutional rights.
Change the things I can and the wisdom to know the difference. And I will cut this bitch up. Don't not mess with me, y'all. Please.
Come on, James.
Please, I'm asking you. I'm begging you, brother. I'm begging you, bro. I'm begging you, bro. Please leave me alone.
Sit on the bed then.
Please leave me alone.
Sit on the bed.
Please leave me alone.
They can give you a shot right here on the chair.
Please leave me alone. Please leave me alone, bro.
Not until you get on the bed.
I'm not getting on that bed.
Help us, man. Help me out, bro.
It doesn't work like that, bro. Anybody know a lawyer, bro? Somebody send me a lawyer? Bro, no!
Come on, James.
It don't work like that, man. This ain't right, man. Don't put the phone down now, motherfucker. Bro, leave me alone. I don't want to leave it on my own. It don't work like that. No, it does not work like that, bro. No. Y'all need to change mental health awareness, mental health help, all that, man. Man, no, man.
Come on, man.
Bro, no. The time is now. The time is now. No. I'm not on drugs, none of that, bro. I'm sane. I'm a sane man. Y'all the ones that's crazy. Y'all the ones that's crazy, bro. No. Come on. Come on, bro. Get your motherfucking hands on me, bro. You don't work like that, bro. I would tell that bitch up, nigga, on my mama, nigga. Get on my baby.
Come on, James.
Get on me, bro. You don't work like that. I'm not crazy. You crazy, white man. Leave me alone, bro.
You're crazy.
Yeah, you did.
I think you're maybe afraid. I understand.
I'm not scared of nothing, bro. I'm not scared of doubt, bro. Please leave me the fuck alone, bro. It don't work like that, bro. Y'all weaken a bitch.
James, come on. Come on, bro.
I'm sorry. Relax. Hurt me. choking me. I'm choking you. You're choking me, bro. Stop. You're choking me, bro. Stop. Stop. Help. Stop. Help, man. This shit ain't right, bro. Stop. Stop. This shit ain't right. All right. It's going to be a revolution now. Y'all already know it's how to start. Y'all put that in motion. Yeah. Shit got to change in America, bro. This is not right, man. This is not right, bro. This is not right, bro.
I know. I'm just saying.
Okay, man. We don't want anything to happen to you. No, man. Y'all don't care about me, man. Y'all greedy, bro. Y'all self.
All right. Okay, so it's a lot to take in, right? So you want to look what I just watched. I just watched Brother Refuses COVID-19 Treatment. All right. This is where it gets tough. This is what I think that the end game is. So you just saw where this guy was appealing. Does anybody know an attorney? You know, he's appealing to the 14th Amendment, which gives us life, liberty, the right to life, liberty, and the happiness of. The most ruling case on vaccines in America is Jacobson versus Massachusetts. We'll take a look at this, and in Jacobson versus Massachusetts, the Supreme Court of 1905, under the Fuller Courts, ruled that the United States government, by the force of military, could in fact vaccinate people against their will. So what happened in this case, this is one of the 4 times that courts have reinforced mandatory vaccinations. In the case of Jacobson versus Massachusetts, a Supreme case that originated when a Massachusetts mandated Cambridge resident, he was a minister by the way, Cambridge passed a ruling that everybody in Cambridge had to be vaccinated for smallpox or be fined, and Reverend Henning Jacobson opposed to the vaccine and challenged the Massachusetts law. Now, Reverend Jacobson had already received the smallpox vaccine, I believe, and he had to get revaccinated because the law stated now that even people who had been vaccinated must be vaccinated again. So it's very interesting what happened in this case because Jacobson believed that he had a right to not being vaccinated. His body was its own, but the Supreme Court ruled in the state's favor, holding that public health and safety is part of a state's policy. State's policy of power, and legislation was a valid exercise of the state's police power and not an invasion of any constitutional rights. Wow. It's hard to believe. Let's read that again. The Supreme Court, under the Fuller Court, held that public health and safety is a part of the state's policy and power, and legislation was a valid exercise of the state's police power and not an invasion of any constitutional rights. What that just said to me, and pretty damn clear that even a layman can understand that, is that it is not an abuse of the state's power to use police power to vaccinate people against their will. In this case, they used police power. It was not an invasion of any constitutional right. The 1905 Fuller Court, the Supreme Court, ruled in essence that a state can vaccinate you against your will, and it's for the better of society. Even when they know that a vaccine is not safe or vaccine is not, vaccine is not healthy for you. It doesn't matter. So when you go look at this case, you see some pretty damn good references in an argument that a preacher would make. You know, my body is a property of God. I should not have to be fined to take a vaccine, be it smallpox, measles, or whatever, that he was looking to stop being vaccinated again. But the court once again held that it doesn't matter. Just as Denmark rushes through an emergency coronavirus law, we know that the United States is already trying to mandate a coronavirus vaccine. And we're going to take a look further at this case through the Western Reserve Law. Basically, in this case, the Supreme Court ruled that a body does not belong to the person that's in control of the body. The body belongs to the government. So let's take a look at this, and just to show you and I'll have all of these in a file so that you can download these. Balancing individual rights and the public health and safety during quarantine, the U.S. and Canada. We're going to take a look at, and this is all through this case and all through this write-up, they're citing the Jacobson versus Massachusetts case that was ruled on by the Fuller Court of 1905. And the Fuller Court, if you guys want to see what the Fuller Court is, here they are. You can look at these guys. And this is why, in my opinion, the Supreme Court judges are far more powerful than the president or at that even Congress. I know that it's kind of hard. See, Congress, we elect a Supreme Court judge in for life, but Congress, they get paid for life as well. But I just often think in my own mind that they have far more power than Congress. Once they're in, they're in. You know, it takes literally a weird movement of Congress to move out a federal judge or a Supreme Court justice. All right, so let's go back here and look in the Jacobson case here. So Jacobson, Massachusetts. 1905, the United States does not derive any of its substantive powers from the preamble of the Constitution. It cannot exert any power to secure the declared objects of the Constitution unless the preamble, I want to find where I want to start on this. Okay, right here. So while the exclusion of evidence in the state court in a case involving the constitution of a state statute may not strictly present a federal question, the court may consider the rejection of such evidence upon the ground of incompetency or immateriality under the statute as showing its scope and meaning. The police power of a state, and I just want to get that word right there. The police power of a state embraces such reasonable regulation relating to matters completely within its territory and not affecting the people of other states established by legislative enactment, and will protect the public health of the safety. Well, how does the police power protect the public health of the safety? Well, the way the police power does it is they do it this way. Eventually it'll get this place to where we'll all be quarantined.
I'm begging you, bro, please. Don't work like that, man. This ain't right, man. Don't put the phone down now, motherfucker. Now, bro, leave it alone. I don't want to leave it on my own. It don't work like that. No, it does not work like that, bro. No. Y'all need to change mental health awareness, mental health help, all that, man. Man, no, man.
Come on, man.
Man, no. The time is now. The time is now. No. I'm not on drugs, none of that, bro. I'm sane. I'm a sane man. Y'all the ones that's crazy.
Come on, James.
Y'all the ones that's crazy, bro.
Come on, man.
No.
James,
No.
come on.
No.
Come on.
No. Get your motherfucking hands off me, bro. You don't talk like that, bro. I would tell this bitch up, nigga, on my mama, nigga. Get on my me.
Come on, James.
Get on me, bro. You don't work like that. I'm not crazy. You crazy, white man. Leave me alone, bro.
You're crazy.
Yeah, you did.
I said you were maybe afraid. I understand.
I'm not scared of nothing, bro. I'm not scared of that, bro. Please leave me the fuck alone, bro. Don't work like that, bro. Y'all reeking a bitch.
Right here. James, come on. Come on, bro. Come on.
Stop. I'm not joking you.
You choking me, bro.
Stop.
You're choking me, bro.
Stop. Help! Stop. Help, man. This shit ain't right, bro. Stop. This shit ain't right. All right. It's going to be a revolution now. Y'all already know what's up started.
All right, let's talk about this now. So, the liberty secured by the Constitution of the United States does not import an absolute right in each person to be at all times and all circumstances wholly freed from restraint, nor is it an element in such liberty that one person or a minority of persons residing in a community or any community and enjoying the benefits of its local government should have power to dominate the majority when supported by their action by the authority of the state. It is within the police power of a state to enact a compulsory vaccine law, and it is for the legislature and not for the courts to determine. It is within the police power of a state to enact a compulsory law, and it is for the legislature and not for the courts to determine. In the first instance, whether the vaccination is or is not the best mode for the prevention of smallpox and the protection of public health. There being obvious reasons for such an exemption, the fact that children under certain circumstances are exempted from the operation of the law does not deny the equal protection of the law to adults if the statute is applicable equally to all adults in like condition. The highest courts of Massachusetts, not having held that the compulsory vaccination law of the state establishes the absolute rule that an adult must be vaccinated, even if he is not a fit or subject at the time for the vaccination would seriously injure his health or cause. The court holds that, as to an adult residing in a community and a fit subject of vaccination, the statute is not invalid as in derogation of the rights of the such person under the 14th Amendment. Everybody, what they're saying by this is that it doesn't matter if a vaccine's the best form of cure. It doesn't matter the person's appeal to his 14th Amendment right. It's within the police power to enforce a vaccination. And if the Congress, if our representatives choose to make a law proceeding under any of the above statutes, the Board of Health of the City of Cambridge, Massachusetts, on the 20th day adopted the following regulation. Whereas smallpox has been prevalent to some of the City of Cambridge, notice that it does not say to all, the City of Cambridge, and still continues to increase. There are a lot of people that want to say that smallpox was this hyped up balloon of a story created to force vaccines. So we're just continuing to look at it. It continues to increase, whereas it is necessary for the speedy extermination of the disease that all persons not protected by vaccination should be vaccinated. And whereas, in the opinion of the Board of Health and Safety, require the vaccination or the revaccination of all the inhabitants of Cambridge, be it ordered that all the inhabitants of the city who have not been successfully vaccinated since 1897, March 1st, be vaccinated or revaccinated. Subsequently, the board adopted an additional regulation empowering a named physician to enforce the vaccination of the persons as directed by the board at its special meeting of February 27th. So, Jacobson denies the second vaccination. He was arrested, thrown in quarantine, having been arraigned, pled not guilty. The government put in evidence the above regulations adopted by the Board of Health and made proof tending to show that its chairman informed the defendant that by refusing to be vaccinated, he would incur the penalty provided by the statute and would be prosecuted therefore, that he offered to vaccinate the defendant without an expense to him, free vaccines, and that the offer was declined and the defendant refused to be vaccinated. The prosecution having introduced no other evidence, the defendant made numerous offers of proof, but the trial court ruled that each and all the facts offered to be proved by the defendant were immaterial and excluded proof of them. The defendant, standing upon his offers of proof and introducing no evidence, asked numerous instructions to the jury, among which are the following. And he lists the following and states, the section referred to was in derogation of the rights secured by the defendant under the 14th Amendment, and especially the clauses of the amendment providing that no state shall make or enforce any law abridging the privileges or immunities of the citizens of the United States, nor deprive any person life, liberty, or property without due process of law, or deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. What was happening back here to James is that he was vaccinated against his will, as he remembered.
Y'all the ones that's crazy. Come on, Jay. Y'all the ones that's crazy, bro. No. No. Come on. No. Come on, bro. Get your motherfucking hands on me, bro. You don't fuck like that, bro. I would tell this bitch up, nigga, on my mama, nigga. Get off my baby. Come on, Jay. Get off me, bro. You don't work like that. I'm not crazy. You crazy, white man. Leave me alone, bro.
You're crazy.
Yeah, you did.
I said you were maybe afraid.
I'm not scared of nothing, bro. I'm not scared of that, bro. Please leave me the fuck alone, bro. Work like that, bro. Y'all weaken a bitch. Right here. Jay, come on. Come on, bro. Come on.
Stop. Relax.
Stop. I'm choking you. You're choking me, bro.
Stop.
You're choking me, bro. Stop. Help!
Stop.
Help, man. This shit ain't right, bro.
Stop.
This ain't right. All right. It's going to be a revolution now. Y'all already know it's how to start. Y'all put that in motion. Yeah. Shit got to change in America, bro. This is not right, man. This is not right, bro. This is not right, bro.
You just say, I know. I'm just saying.
Okay, man.
We don't want anything to happen to you.
No, man. Y'all don't care about me, man. Y'all greedy, bro. Y'all selfish. Y'all are greedy. Y'all weak in the bitch, too. Took all y'all to do this. Y'all weak.
Okay, so, wow, looking through this Supreme Court government opinions, you're going to see this. Contrary to the petitioner's argument, there is no reason to believe that, well, we got to go up and look at what we're reading at. This is a reading on an appeal to the Third Circuit Court. The National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of '86 created a no-fault compensation to stabilize the vaccine market and adversely affected by an increase in vaccine-related tort litigation. So shortly after 1905 this case was ruled, the National Vaccine Injury Center was formed, I believe it was, and they've done great work on doing the only thing they could. When this case passed, the court said that they do not care if a vaccine is safe. Their exact words were, vaccines are unavoidably safe. And this case came down in the ruling of 2011 March. The Supreme Court ruled that you cannot sue drug companies over faulty manufacturing practices because vaccines are unavoidably safe. Unsafe, sorry, they're unavoidably unsafe. They know they're unsafe. Protesting, doing anything we're going to do is not going to work because the country is not going to release this case. This is one of 4 cases, Jacobson VS Massachusetts, that gave the courts, gave the police the power to vaccinate us all. And here's what happens if you don't get vaccinated. You go into quarantine, you're forced to pay a fine. You'll either be vaccinated in quarantine or what. And that's only if the government wants to put you in quarantine. If they just straight up want to put you in quarantine and vaccinate you, they have the power to do it. It just, you kill me, you can do like this guy said right here on the video, whatever, there's going to be a revolution. No, there's not. There's not going to be a revolution in the United States, I don't think. There wasn't a revolution when, JFK was killed in front of our parents' faces, our grandparents' faces. I believe something completely different about that. I don't want to get into it right now. I believe that was a total staged event. We did nothing when our soldiers went into Vietnam, and we went into Vietnam under false pretenses. We knew that we went in, well, we later found out we went under a lie, that the USS Liberty was bombed to get us into that war, in which we got into several wars because of false narratives. We did nothing once we found out 58,000 American people were injured in this war because the government wanted, to profit from the human lives. We did nothing even when the USS Liberty was bombed and we found out later it was done by Israel. We did nothing to avenge that. We did nothing once we found out that many of our Chicago, Sears Tower, when that was attacked, we did nothing. We found out it was totally set up. 9/11, the hand of the United States government, the hand of Israel, other people involved in this. Even President Donald Trump has said that the towers were bombed. We did nothing about it. You have the bank failure of 2008, the small Wall Street protest. We did nothing about it. Life as usual. We're not going to do anything about the COVID. We're just kind of walking through this again as though we're sheep led to a slaughter. There's no end game. There's nothing I can say that'll change this, because there's no fucking way, man, our Supreme Court is going to change forced vaccination laws. The Supreme Court, in my opinion, again, they're the most powerful people in the world. The Supreme Court can take over a country for hundreds of years and just keep passing the control to the exact people that they want put in office in the position of the Supreme Court. There's unfortunately no way out of this. There is just no way out of this. I mean, it is within the police power of a state to enact a compulsory vaccination law. and it is for the legislature and not for the courts to determine. The police can vaccinate you. The National Guard can vaccinate you against your will. It's the end game. It's over. The only way that that's going to change is to overturn the Fuller Court. The Fuller Court's 1905 rule, and you can't overturn it. I mean, I don't. It's just, forced vaccinations. Everybody points to Jacobson versus Massachusetts. Your body's not yours. It belongs to the state. If they can vaccinate you against your will, you are a slave. You may not believe it. You might be a rich slave. You may be a poor slave. But you are, in fact, a slave. If you look at some of the things that the court has said, this is how the courts have ruled in some certain cases here, because I have shots of this. The matured opinions of medical men everywhere and the experience of mankind, as all must know, the negative suggestion that it is not possible in any case to determine whether vaccination is safe. The courts know that vaccinations in many cases aren't safe. The court also said may be compelled by force, if need be, against his will and without the regard to his personal wishes or his personal interests or even his religious or political convictions to take place in the ranks of the army and risk the chance of being shot down in its defense. This was concerning soldiers who go in and say, I don't want to be vaccinated. Tough luck. A common belief, like common knowledge, does not require evidence to establish its existence, but may be acted upon without any proof by the legislature and the courts. The fact that the belief is not universal is not controlling, for there is scarcely any belief that it is accepted by everyone. The possibility that the belief may be wrong and that the science may yet to show it may be wrong is not conclusive, for what people believe is for the common welfare must be accepted as tending to promote the common welfare, whether or not, and in fact it does. They may not even care that a vaccine is not safe. Compulsory vaccination could not, in any conceivable case, be legally enforced in a community, even at the command of the legislature. However widespread the epidemic of smallpox and however deep and universal was the belief of the community and its medical advisors that a system of general vaccination was vital to the safety of all. Jesus Christ. This is what the courts have the power to sterilize you if they believe it is needed. And I forget the case of these young girls. One was, what they consider Down syndrome, and she had she was a third generation, and the courts finally, and I'll have the link under here, I'll go back and pull the case for us, but the courts had ruled this: it's better for the world if instead of waiting to execute degenerate offspring for crime or let them starve for their imbecility, society can prevent those who are manifestly unfit from continuing their kind. The principle that sustains compulsory vaccination is broad enough to cover cutting the fallopian tubes. 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. Compulsory vaccination laws are as old as America is old. So, in this link that I'm going to give you guys here, under scholarly common law case, this paper will discuss the U.S. government decision regarding elements of quarantine and individual rights, whether and when the federal government can become involved, and the tensions between state and federal government. After analyzing the U.S. handling of quarantine, Canada's quarantine laws will be briefly addressed in this. If quarantine especially is important in today's world with the increased threat of bioterrorism, It's in the public's best interest for the state and federal government to know what they can and cannot do before a bioterrorist attack occurs, instead of waiting until after. Among all objects sought to be secured by government laws, none is more important than the preservation of public health. And again, the court need not care whether vaccines are safe or whether they work. The state government has that primary control and authority for creating quarantine laws. And from an early day of power of states to enact and enforce quarantine laws for the safety and protection and the health of their inhabitants, as recognized by Congress. The ability of a state to enact measures to protect public health is not part of the police power of the state. The right of the states to pass and regulate quarantine laws has also been recognized by the judiciary and the national and state level. In Railroad Company versus Houston, the U.S. Supreme Court recognized the right of a state to pass sanitary laws for the protection of life, liberty, health, and property within its limit, laws to prevent persons and animals from suffering under contagious or infectious disease, or convicts from coming within its borders. The Supreme Court upheld the state right to enact quarantine laws, 1922 with Ex parte Company. The court stated the power to so quarantine in proper case and reasonable way is not open to question. It is exercised by the state in the subdivision of the state daily. The District Court of Appeals in California in Ex parte Johnson confirmed the right of a state to create quarantine laws, stating that adoption of measures for the protection of public health is a valid exercise of police power of the state, as to which legislator is necessarily vested in large discretion, not only determining what contagious and infectious diseases, but adopting means to prevent their spread. This is crazy, man. The power and the ability to create quarantine laws has limits. A state has a power to create quarantine laws, but does not have the right to abuse its power. And this is what we're talking about. Is it in the state's abuse of power to force this guy here to be vaccinated against his will? As we see here.
I'm gonna tell that bitch up, nigga, on my mama, nigga. Get out of me! Come on, James. Get out of me, bro! You don't work like that. I'm not crazy. You crazy, white man. Leave me alone, bro.
You're crazy.
Yeah, you did.
I said you were maybe afraid. I understand.
I'm not scared of nothing, bro. I'm not scared of now, bro. But you please leave me the fuck alone, bro. You don't work like that, bro. Y'all weak in the bitch. Look, right here. James, come on. Come on, bro. You don't...
Stop. Relax.
Stop. I'm not choking you. You're choking me, bro. Stop. You're choking me, bro.
Stop.
Help!
Stop.
Help, man. This shit ain't right, bro. Stop. This shit ain't right.
Man, I mean, it's like we've all been there. I can understand this guy's frustration, but the state has the power to choose to inoculate you, as he just had, and even quarantine him. And what did the state say? That quarantine will not be over quickly, because a person may be quarantined by the state until such time as he is no longer contagious, however long that may be. And who decides how long it is? A doctor appointed by the government. The law reasonably assumes that the consecutive orders for quarantine may be issued so long as a person continues to be infected with tuberculosis and on reasonable grounds believed by the health officer to be dangerous to the public health. So a health officer could just say he's got a fever, lock him up. And you will stay there until that person releases you. When you're no longer a threat or you're no longer infectious. And that's what's happened in America. We've been quarantined. And each state determines what it means to no longer to be a threat. Some states require specific testing before the release, while others vaguely provide a release. but it could last for several years if the person continues to show symptoms. It's just the craziest thing that I've ever freaking read. Smallpox in shopping malls in Oklahoma City, Philadelphia, and Atlanta. This exercise illustrated how underprepared relevant government agencies were for bioterrorism. The National Guard of a state, this is what I wanted to show you. Wow. So, the National Guard of a state can help enforce quarantine as long as it's operating as a state actor pursuant to Title 32 of the U.S. Code. If the National Guard is functioning as a state actor, it may be used by the local board of the Department of Health to assist in civil law enforcement, for example, the enforcement of a quarantine. The local board can draw the National Guard as a base from which to draw quarantine guards, which effectively eliminates the need to require additional guards from the general public. Wow. Quarantine is the most drastic of a number of measures used to control infectious disease, so a person's liberty should not be restricted unnecessarily. As the most drastic measure, it should also be the measure most heavily regulated to prevent individual rights from disappearing completely. Wow. As described above, courts have ruled that a person does not lose fundamental rights guarantees just because a person becomes ill with a contagious disease or exposed to a contagious disease. While the government may restrict a person's movement and freedom in ways that it could not with those who are healthy and unexposed, the government can not and should not be allowed to completely disregard a person's rights. Before determining what quarantine is applicable to a situation, the Board of Health should identify the disease in concern. Right now they've identified corona and they've quarantined us all. Constitutional guarantees of life, liberty, and the property of which a person cannot be deprived without due process of a law do not limit the exercise of the police power of a state to preserve the health so long as that power is reasonably and fairly exercised and not abused. I'm really blown away by this all. The standard proof for a state to quarantine is very low. The state may only establish probable cause that a person is infectious. With such a low standard of proof required to institute a quarantine, a state should undergo vigorous self-examinations to ensure quarantine is necessary in order to protect due process rights of individuals, because time is of the essence. Wow. They basically now, this is interesting. My friend Ed, who's a constable, former constable, he and I were talking a couple of weeks ago. We're talking about the Posse Comitatus Act, and the only thing that could save United States of America from a government takeover to where our rights are fundamentally taken away. And in this case, a lot of us have gone to the hospitals and we haven't seen this massive problem that, the media is enacting. The problem we're having here, in my opinion, is that the media has blown this thing up so bad they control America. The media controls the earth, if you will, because everybody believes what the frickin' media says. And under a Posse Comitatus Act, Congress limited the use of the United States Army in civilian law enforcement. We were talking about this a few days ago. I made the mistake of saying we're under martial law, though we sort of are, but we're not. We're under what's called a quarantine. The state has the right, and the federal government has the right to issue quarantine laws as they have done. The only thing that can stop this is if the sheriff stood up and employed or found any reasonable male above the age of 15 to push back the federal military. But I don't foresee that happening. Sheriffs are bots. So, the strength of the Posse Comitatus has been greatly diminished since the time it was passed. What was that, 1897, I think, that the Posse Comitatus law was passed? Somewhere around there. It has been repeatedly circumvented by subsequent legislation and diminished or disregarded by the action of several presidents. Congress has authorized the military use in law enforcement for drug trafficking, immigration, the civil disturbance statutes, natural disasters, and homeland defense. While the Posse Comitatus remains a deterrent to prevent the unauthorized deployment of troops at the local level in response to what is purely civilian law enforcement matter, it's a hollow shell and a place of law that formerly was a limitation to the military's role in civilian law enforcement and security issues. The number of exceptions and policy shifts in regards to Posse Comitatus over the past 20 years strongly indicate that it is not a major barrier to the use of military force in battle against terrorism. So I stand corrected. We're not, as I said days ago, that I thought we're under military or martial law. We're not. We're under quarantine law, so they can take away your rights, restrict your movement, and do it in the name of health. And there's nothing you can do about it. And if the government wanted to vaccinate us all, in which they could, we would have to do it. We're slaves. So due process doesn't matter in this case. This is what we call end game. I'm not saying they're going to come and vaccinate us for corona. I'm not saying I believe all the hype about corona. I don't. I know that I got sicker than I'd ever been in my life really fast. Like within 2 days, I was almost annihilated. If it was an elderly person, they would have died without a doubt. So, who knows? I mean, my father-in-law was in there passing away and, had pneumonia. And so I could have got it, and that's what, took him out along with the cancer. So it's been a long video. I'm going to let you guys go and probably do a part 2 of this with an attorney friend of mine who's already told me that he'll come on and talk about this. But yeah, we are definitely slaves. And this lockdown proves that you're a slave. It is not a martial law. It's not illegal for the government to do this lockdown. And, it's where we are. We're slaves. And this is where it ends. They own your body. They own your bank account. The feds own every part of your existence that is needed. You are their slave. This is their lockdown. If they want to pass mandatory vaccine laws that we all have to get, either you refuse them, you get taken away, put in quarantine, your children get taken away, put in quarantine, go to the Department of Health, and you lose your children, it's not worth it. So if a vaccine came out, we're forced to do it, just take the vaccine. You have no choice. They'll do what they did to this man right here. And because the laws are written in the way that they did, and the most powerful court that exists is the problem of the Fuller courts. Is the Fuller court said that they can vaccinate us against our will, even if the vaccine shows non-beneficial, non-medical beneficial. And I'll give us this last quote as we go, just so you can read something cool here. Let me see if I can get this to view to full screen. The liberty secured by the Constitution of the United States to every person within its jurisdiction does not import an absolute right in each person to be, at all times and in all circumstances, wholly freed from restraint. There are times when they can lock us up. There are manifold restraints to which every person is necessarily subject for the common good. On any other basis, organized society could not exist with safety to its members. Society based on the rule that each one is a law unto himself would soon be confronted with disorder and anarchy. Real liberty for all could not exist under the operation of a principle which recognizes the right of each individual person to use his own, whether in respect of his persons or his property, regardless of the injury that may be done to others. They own us, and that was from a federal judge, a Supreme Court judge. They own us. It's like, when you have that wake up moment that, damn, there's like literally nothing that I can do. Supreme Court, March 2011, vaccines are unavoidably unsafe. They can be done with the greater good. There can be animal parts in vaccines. What are you going to do? They own us. So you guys can go look up this case. Here's another one. This is Boone versus Boozman. I forgot about this one. So in this case here, the person believes, Cynthia Boone, believed that she had a religious freedom to not vaccinate her children before they start public school, and the court disagreed. So that's one for you to look up, Boone versus Boozman. These are the 1905 Supreme Court that shot us down, ruined us all. Lochner versus New York is another one. These are some of the decisions that the Supreme Court ruled on during the 1905. The 1905 court, you can go look that up. What is this here? Yeah, 4 times when the court ruled to vaccinate. In Jacobson, Massachusetts. That's probably the most important vaccination case that ever happened in the United States. It is. There's no doubt it's the most important vaccine case that took our rights away. So, you don't have rights. In the end game, you belong to the state. And, over the past 3 days, I've just been taking all that in and saying, well, damn, I belong to the state. So, anyways, I'm going to let you go, everybody. And I hope that this video showed you that there has to be representatives and legislation that allows you to have a religious or personal conviction to not be vaccinated, but it's never going to work during the point of a national emergency. So get ready. The time's coming. If they want to vaccinate us all, you got to do it. It's not worth it to lose your children, be fined, thrown in jail for however long. There's no period of time they can hold you indefinitely. And I wanted to show you something. This is probably the most incredible finding you're going to find. They know there's a cure for corona. This is coming from Harvard Health Medical School. You guys see this? healthharvard.edu. This is the cure for corona. Okay. How the virus spreads, social distancing, if you're at higher risk. Now watch this. I've heard that high dose of vitamin C is being used to treat patients with COVID. Does it work? And should I take vitamin C to prevent the infection? Again, from Harvard Health EDU. Some critically ill patients with COVID-19 have been treated with high doses of intravenous vitamin C in the hopes that it will hasten recovery. However, there's no convincing science that it works in infection, and it's not standard part of treatment for this infection. A new study is underway in China. The results are expected this fall. The idea that a high dose of vitamin C might help overwhelming infections is not new. A 2017 study found that a high dose of vitamin C treatment, along with thiamine, and if my wife was here, she'd have these in corticosteroids, appeared to prevent deaths among people with sepsis, a form of overwhelming infection, dangerously low blood pressure, and organ failure. Another study published last year assessed that the effect of high dose of vitamin C among patients with severe infections and acute respiratory disease, very similar to COVID, in which the lungs fill with fluid. While the study's main measures improvement did not improve with the first 4 days of vitamin C therapy, there was a lower death rate at 28 days among treated patients. Okay? Now watch this. There's a lot of talk right now whether vitamin C is what's going to help prevent infection. Regarding prevention, there's no evidence that taking vitamin C will help prevent infection with the coronavirus. While the standard dose of vitamin C are generally harmless, high doses can cause side effects and cramps. All right, here we go. Remdesivir, effective for treating COVID-19. Scientists all over the world are testing whether drugs previously developed to treat other viral infections might also be effective against the new coronavirus. One drug that has received a lot of attention is the antiviral drug remdesivir. That's because the coronavirus that causes COVID-19 is similar to the coronaviruses that cause SARS and MERS. And evidence from laboratory and animal studies suggests that remdesivir may help limit the reproduction and spread of these viruses in the body. In particular, there's a critical part of all three viruses that can be targeted by drugs. The critical part, which is important, enzyme, that the virus needs to reproduce, is virtually identical to all three of the coronaviruses. Drugs like remdesivir that successfully hit the target in the viruses cause SARS and MERS are likely to work against the coronavirus. Let's keep reading down here. Wow, this will blow your mind. Now, are chloroquine and hydrochloroquine effective for treating coronavirus? Recently, there's been considerable discussion whether the two related drugs that have been available for decades to treat illness might also be effective in treating COVID-19. Now, I remember a couple of days ago hearing Donald Trump ask about this, but we're going to take a look at here. The question is, of course, the drugs are primarily used to treat malaria and several inflammatory diseases, including systematic lupus, rheumatoid arthritis. So my wife has rheumatoid arthritis. No drug is perfectly safe, but these are quite safe when used for just several days. They might be needed to treat COVID-19. They're also cheap and readily available at our local drugstores and relatively free of side effects. The cure to corona is there. The question, of course, is whether they are effective against coronavirus that causes COVID-19. Are they effective in killing the virus in a laboratory dish? And are they effective in killing the virus in people? If the answer to the first question is no, there's no point in getting to the second. So are they effective against the coronavirus? Okay, there's strong evidence that both drugs kill the COVID-19 viruses in a laboratory dish. The drugs appear to work through two mechanisms. First, they make it harder for the virus to attach itself to the cell, inhibiting the virus from entering the cell and multiplying within it. Second, the virus does manage to get inside the cell. The drugs kill it before it can multiply. So, but do the drugs work in people? One report in 2020 claimed that chloroquine had been used in more than 100 patients in China. The scientists stated that their results demonstrated that it is superior to the control, the treatment, inhibiting the worsening of pneumonia, improving lung image findings, eliminating the virus from the body, shortening the duration of the disease. And I'll have this so you can go read it. Now, they're saying no evidence was to measure how severe the person was sick. I don't think there's a way to measure how severe the person was. There's a way to measure through imaging how severe the pneumonia in the lungs are, but it also said that the disease was limited or even taken away where there was problems with pneumonia in the lungs. Small study conducted by a group of scientists in southern France, hit hard by COVID-19, not a randomized trial. Instead, scientists compared 26 patients who received hydrochloroquine to 16 who did not. After 6 days, the virus was gone from the body in 70% of those given to the treatment, compared to 12.5% of those who weren't. The drug appeared to be as effective in the sickest patient as in the least, but the study was too small to be sure about that. So there are many studies underway. And in my opinion, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer. If Harvard is saying that these two drugs, chloroquine and hydrochloroquine, are effective for treating COVID-19, why are we not going crazy with this? If they're also saying that vitamin C is a valid treatment for it, though it may or may not be because there's not enough time with the disease, we should be looking at this. So anyways, you guys go check this out, read through it. Read through the information. Where can you buy this? I've gone to look. Where can I buy chloroquine 250 milligram online? It's a drug used to treatment of malaria. The same active ingredient, chloroquine, to combat malaria, parasites, and is anti-inflammatory. The drug is suitable for the prevention of malaria infection as well for the treatment of acute malaria attack. What's it used for? It's a disease which malaria can be found in tropical areas. It's a parasite. It's also used for anti-inflammatory for arthritis. So look up these two. I believe that they're the another thing that we found is that the Z-Pack, what is it, Heather? Or what is it? What's the long-term? Azithromycin, right, is the cure for coronavirus. If that's the cure for coronavirus, there's Z-Packs in all hospitals across the nation. So, Coronavirus Resource Center, Harvard Medical Health. I think this is a lot better than a vaccine, don't you think? So, I also wanted to get into state quarantine and isolation statutes, which I just may go through this tomorrow on a second video. We've been on a long time, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hell, I guess ruined many of your life and fight. We got to somehow get rid of this law. We got to overturn, maybe not overturn Jacob versus Massachusetts, but present another case that gives us more rights. Stop, Apple. That gives us more rights, because right now they can just literally vaccinate us against our own will under a national emergency. So this is the case law to overturn. I don't even know how you overturn it. It's already set in stone.
I don't think you can.
Well, you have to appeal on the grounds that, see, it's just weird because they've covered our life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in this case. In essence, the government can do what they want to you. It's within the power, it's within police power of a state to enact a compulsory vaccination law. And it is for the legislator and not the courts. The police can do it. So There you go. The highest court of Massachusetts not having held that a mandatory vaccine law of that state establishes the absolute rule that an adult male must be vaccinated if he is not fit and subject. God damn it, they got us. And it's not a degradation of any rights of such person under the 14th Amendment. They can do it. They can kill us. When they know that it can cause injury, it doesn't matter. They own you. All right, guys. Thank you for watching. Just a reminder,
With the kitty.
you are a slave.